Well, it's time to check in with our media partners from thevoiceofoc.org for an update on what's happening this week in Orange County government and politics. And here to talk about issues in the news right now, we welcome Editor-in-Chief for the Voice of OC, Norberto Santana.
Hi, Norberto.
And Greg, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, we're glad to have you on. Let's start, first of all, in the city of Santa Ana. We want to talk about Santa Ana City Council meeting that happened on Tuesday night. They fired city manager Paul Walters with a 6-1 vote. Let's back up just a little bit. Was that expected?
Well, we have been tracking that story for quite a while. The confrontation between this city council and longtime Mayor Miguel Pulido has been broiling for a while. Ironically, these council members who dubbed themselves as the Santa Ana Spring have been challenging quietly Miguel Pulido's power base in Santa Ana little by little. We had reported that day that Paul Walters has been in play for a while. This council sees him as closely aligned with Mayor Pulido. And this week they decided to take a vote on that action.
Okay, so the council is a new council, and as you said, they are sort of referring to themselves as Santa Ana Springs, like they're sort of the new version of what the city council should look like. Their reason for getting rid of Paul Walters, though, was not made abundantly clear at the city council meeting. And I'm wondering, in all of your digging and your producers' digging, did they find anything more?
You're right. It's a bizarre scenario here with a group of council members who are touting their commitment to transparency, not telling you why it's time to get rid of a longtime city employee who many people believe has done a decent job as police chief and has grappled with the city that's near the brink of bankruptcy. However, they haven't. The ironic part is after that vote, there is now a debate in Santa Ana under the city manager's contract. He has the ability to trigger a public hearing. And again, we're getting into a really weird scenario where an at-will employee who does have an employment contract and under the city charter can ask council members to hold a public hearing to talk about what they won't tell anybody at all, which is why they want to fire him.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. You just said the words at-will and contract in the same sentence, and an at-will employee generally doesn't have a contract.
Right.
Well, at will is a definition used for someone who doesn't have generally civil service protections. However, top-level administrators typically do have their own employment contracts, which means you can fire them, but typically there's an expensive payout. In Walter's case, it's $265,000 a year of salary, or he gets to move back to be police chief if they don't want him as city manager anymore. Complicating factor for the Santa Ana City Council is they already have an interim police chief. Tomorrow, I believe on Thursday, there will be a hearing on this issue, and it should be a pretty dramatic tale of events.
At that meeting, were there an overabundance of Paul Walters supporters or people who weren't Paul Walters supporters? Was it tipped one way or the other?
Absolutely. I'd almost say it was even. There are many people in that city that feel comfortable having an experienced administrator such as Walters' role overseeing the city right now during a very delicate situation where they're going into negotiations with their police force on a new contract. They've got a lawsuit pending with the state over more than $50 million. However, there are many people in Santa Ana. It's 78% Latino and all Latino city council. There are many activists throughout town that feel that Mr. Walters is just not fit for the amazing multicultural challenge that's going to face the next city manager of Santa Ana.
City Council went into a closed-door meeting during the City Council meeting to discuss, I presume, what they were going to do with Paul Walters. And when they came out, were asked point blank, what is the reason behind getting rid of him? And they said it was a personnel issue. Can they do that?
That's where you get into this tricky mode of law. Under city manager contracts, there are certain stipulations about what council members can do and say. However, we do live in First Amendment rights do exist even for council members. They can most certainly talk about why they want to change a position, the direction of their town. However, they do have to be careful because Mr. Walters does have an employment contract that does speak to different types of communications having to be done in concert together.
Okay, let's move on a little bit to the Orange County Fair Board calling for audits from the past privatization bill. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Another controversial effort that's kind of coming to culmination now after several years of the scenario in the Schwarzenegger administration to privatize the fairgrounds, where a faction of the Fair Board members initially began the organization of a nonprofit. However, there have always been questions about how that nonprofit was paid for and how public funds were utilized to hire lobbyists and lawyers such as former State Senator Dick Ackerman and the county's own lobbyist, Platinum Advisor, to actually be lobbying to sell a public asset like the fairgrounds. This has been going on for several years. Recently, the fairgrounds set up a fair sale review committee that included activists, vendors, and in this case, a former police chief, Mike McGrary from the city of Los Alamitos, who basically accused the council, the fair board, of laundering contracts to those lobbyists and lawyers to sell the fairgrounds, that they have never really stood up and talked to the public about how they did that. There's also great frustration with the district attorney's office in a review that they did that initially cleared the fair board members. However, we at Voice of OC have done stories that showed serious deficiencies in that investigation, which has since been turned back on.
So the moral of both stories is transparency, and we'll be checking in with you as the next couple of weeks to make sure that both stories are as transparent as they should be, right?
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks a lot, Norberto.